Hi, my name is Ashley Cowart, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about the Sumerian and Tang civilizations. So I kind of just wanted to talk about kind of a background about the Sumerian civilization. So this map to the left, you can see this is Mesopotamia, and the southern side is Sumer. So Sumer came to be because farmers from the north brought their crop raising techniques southward. And the Tigris and Euphrates rivers were essential to its survival as it provided reliable irrigation for sustainable agriculture. And then agricultural villages began to emerge over thousands of years in Sumer. So you can see those villages around that purple area on the map. I'm just going to quickly breeze through some of the Sumerian politics and society so we can kind of get a better idea of them. Obviously, you can read the slide more if you want to know more about them, but they were a patriarchal hereditary dynasty. Later on, they turned into that. At the beginning, they were not like that. It was kind of a temporary power thing with priests and military leaders assuming power, but then over time, it turned into the patriarchal hereditary dynasty. They had palaces and kings to kind of represent that power and that royal status. The kings worked closely with the religious figures, and they kind of relied on their connection with the gods for their power. Slaves existed in this civilization, and they were at the bottom of society. The tiers of power began to be established, so obviously slaves at the bottom. Occasionally, women would be able to independently own estates, and they could own their own property and distribute it to their offspring. Some Sumerian achievements: they established the patriarchal hereditary dynasties. They created cuneiform, which is on the right. You can see that's their form of writing. And then they had a scribal school as well, but this was not to record speech. It was more to enhance the growing power of elites. They wrote numbers and even demonstrated the use of multiplication and division, and they developed the concept of place value. Continuing on about their achievements, they built ziggurats, which was the kind of temple type things, and on the left you can see that in the middle of that little city. That's a ziggurat. They created the world's first epic poem, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Fashion was prevalent and music was really important. They created massive hydraulic projects such as reservoirs, dams, and dikes. They established the basic social, economic, and intellectual patterns of Mesopotamia and influenced the north and east, and polytheism was their main religion. So now I want to talk about the Tang dynasty. This is some more background on them so we can get a better understanding. You can see to the left on this map how big and powerful they were, just how much land they conquered. This dynasty was founded by Li Yang, and it's considered one of the high points of Chinese civilizations. The capital during the Tang dynasty was Chang'an, and it stimulated cultural exchange of knowledge. The first two Tang rulers were Gaozu and Taizong. Their armies were formed with both Chinese and non-Chinese troops. Empress Wu and consort Yang Guifeng were two women during the Tang dynasty that arose to positions of great political power. Empress Wu was married to Emperor Gaizong, and he ended up passing away, and she just took power. She identified herself or proclaimed herself as the emperor in 690, and she had a really strong and powerful rule. So overall, the Tang dynasty was very culturally diverse. They embraced the difference of the world, and they just really expanded. Talking about some of their achievements, they became one of the strongest and largest nations in the world at the time, which, looking to the map on the last slide, you can definitely see that. Chang'an became the most populous city in the world. Both Chang'an and Luoyang were cosmopolitan cities, so they were cities that hosted people of different ethnicities, cultures, and religions. They absorbed these different cultures and religions into their own society. Empress Wu proclaimed herself as emperor, making her the only woman in Chinese history to take that title. And then they used imperial examination that allowed people to come into office. So the people that had to take the exam, they had to master Confucian classics and the rules of poetry. Woodblocking printing was developed in the early Tang dynasty. Some more achievements that they have is that the porcelain and gunpowder was invented. The Tang dynasty is considered the greatest age for Chinese poetry. Foreign fashions and new musical instruments/tunes became popular. Pure Land and Chan were two popular Buddhist schools, and Buddhism was the dominant religion for the civilization, but there were several other religions that existed and were practiced as well. So comparing the Sumerian and Tang civilization achievements, I'm going to kind of just breeze through it, but The Tang and Sumerian civilizations were similar in an artistic aspect. The Tang civilization, or dynasty, was passionate about poetry, music, and art, and the Sumerians also valued poetry, music, and art. They both had artifacts that displayed poems and art, which insinuates the importance of both in their cultures and daily life. Both implemented new inventions in their society, so the Tang created gunpowder and porcelain, and Sumerian implemented hydraulic projects to boost agriculture. Both had a social hierarchy. The Tang had emperors and government officials. The Sumerian had kings and priests. They both had important architecture in the center of their cities. So the Tang had imperial palaces. Sumerians had ziggurats. Both civilizations were wealthy and powerful, and power was passed down through hereditary lines. So contrasting the two, I did find some differences. The Tang dynasty embraced Buddhism. The Sumerian civilizations were polytheistic, but the difference is that even though the Tang identified as Buddhism, like that was the majority, they had so many other religions being practiced at the same time because of the amount of people that they, and different like ethnicities and religions that they had in their civilization at the time. And then the Tang dynasty, kind of their crawl to power is that the Tang dynasty, they had the imperial examination, but they also had power passed down hereditary. Sumerian, it's a little bit different because originally they had that temporary power with the priests and military leaders, but eventually that turned into the hereditary patriarchal thing. And then a little bit of the difference too is that the Tang, they also had women rule. The Sumerian never really had that. And the Tang also had power passed down to grandsons, not always directly sons like the Sumerian. Sumerians established a form of writing known as cuneiform, and the Tang civilization created woodblock printing. Sumerian created a scribe school, and Tang only boosted. So the Buddhist schools that were already there, the Tang didn't create those. They just kind of boosted their popularity. The Tang dynasty embraced outside knowledge and influence, while the Sumerians influenced those around them. The Tang dynasty had cosmopolitan cities, while the Sumerian cities maintained local influence only. So the criteria for a great civilization and society, I really go into depth in it on this whole slide so you guys can read about it. But in essence, I really think that having a proper environment, common language, effective administration and government, social structure, labor division, trade, and architecture really makes the civilization great. And I talk about each kind of one of those categories in depth in this slide. In what ways do 21st century ideas differ from the two civilizations you chose? And I'm going to read this to you guys because I think that it's pretty good. So 21st century ideas differ drastically from the two ancient civilizations I chose. When looking at Sumer and Tang, we can see that in the 21st century, women are much more accepted in society. Nowadays, we have women in powerful government positions and controlling their own businesses, lives, and educational goals. The 21st century is also much more technologically advanced than both civilizations discussed. Tang and Sumer civilizations also tolerated slavery, Sumer more than Tang. Now in the 21st century, generally speaking, slavery is not tolerated and can be criminal in most cases. I also believe that the 21st century is very accepting of differences. Tang may have been the blueprint for us, but Sumer wasn't close. When it comes to religion, cultures, and ethnicities, people tend to embrace those who are different and learn more from them opposed to shutting them out. I also believe the labor division is very different in the 21st century, especially in younger generations. The ability to travel, live life, and find your calling is encouraged nowadays, opposed to working on a farm and in agriculture. Overall, the 21st century civilization has much more freedom and choice in their own individual wants and needs, opposed to being so community-based. So I think just overall, this 21st century idea is that we're all much more individual and not as big of a community as it once was back then. And here are my references. Thank you guys so much for listening to this presentation. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it.